Thank you very much. Appreciate the introduction, and great to be here talking to you folks. My job is to give you a little talk a little bit about regional perspectives associated with collaborations, regional collaborations. And so I'll bring up the PowerPoint here. Okay. So an agenda for today, give you a little bit of economic background related to water utilities, and then talk a little bit about a study of the cost of water system connection that my firm has done in California. And then talk about a new report that's out that we authored on the toolbox for utility partnerships, and it has a focus on economic perspectives there. And then conclude with an affordability example from California that my firm also has worked on. So just kind of a tour of some economic issues related to collaboration. And so some acknowledgments. This work is not just mine that I'm presenting, but others from Corona Environmental Consulting, Tara Henry, Vivian Jensen, Chad Seidel, and Bob Rauscher from Corona. Also the partnership utility toolbox, we worked with Water Research Foundation. Katie Henderson was instrumental there in that work. So just some on the background for economics of utilities. The Federal Safe Drinking Water Act has made significant progress in providing a safe drinking water nationally. And one study says 90% of all water customers have water that meets all standards all the time now. So that's great progress. The public spending for water and wastewater utilities really falls on the local and state governments. So 96% of that spending comes from the local level, paid for by rates, charges, and sometimes you'll be able to spread those charges out over time using municipal bonds and loans and things like that. But the burden really falls on the local level to pay for safe drinking water and keeping up with all the requirements. And the compliance burden is greater for most small systems. Larger utilities are able to spread the cost of treatment and operations and maintenance across larger customer base than small utilities. This is really kind of the crux of the challenge for small utilities. And the water business is a very capital intensive business when it comes to needing treatment and kind of meeting requirements going forward. And when you've got large capital expenses like that, then often you have large operations and maintenance expenses going forward that you also need to be able to meet. And sometimes it's really being able to meet that operations and maintenance expense in the future that is tricky. And costs have been rising for both capital and O&M. Capital to meet new treatment requirements, renew and replace aging infrastructure. We heard from the Senator about lead service lines, another major cost coming forward for utilities. And so all these capital costs are continuing to grow for utilities. And O&M costs have been increasing faster than inflation. So you have that combined effect there. Water rates have been increased over the last 10%. The last 10 years, about 5.5% per year on average, which is about 3 times the rate of inflation. And on top of that, water rates in many areas were not adequate to meet needs already. So utilities were deferring capital expenses or deferring maintenance and things like that. So not taking on full costs to begin with, and not using full cost pricing has been kind of a base of the problem. And then you've got rising costs on top of that. So I want to talk a little bit about mergers and regionalization can be a good possibility for helping address these costs. You really want to try to spread the cost over a larger customer base. Being able to get larger systems together, regionalize, is part of that possible solution that we're here to talk about. And so California, I just wanted to mention a study that my colleagues put together for the Water Foundation, looking at the cost of water system mergers in California. And part of the question was, what proportion of small systems serving 3,300 persons, so small systems, potentially could be merged with larger systems within 3 miles? So just really kind of a geographic information systems analysis to be able to look at those possibilities for consolidation. And the answer was about 35 to 45% of systems that were looked at in the GIS analysis were close enough within that 3 mile range in order to be able to be merged. And so there was a cost analysis that goes with this, looking at the cost to make that connection, to provide any tanks or storage associated with that. And so on this table here, we've got a breakdown of how that looked. Again, these are all just for systems within 3 miles that could be connected. So for small systems and with violations, so population less than 3,300, that top row there is 140 million to 211 million. So very expensive. And this is for the systems. Kind of gives about 250 systems with violations. For all small water systems, population less than 3,300, looking at in the billions, we're looking at $3 to $5 billion for all small systems. And then for very small water systems, populations less than 500, still in the billions there, 2.8 to $3.5 billion. So this is just the capital cost too. This is not looking at the ongoing operations and maintenance costs, just looking at the capital costs that would be reasonable in order to meet industry standards. So this is an example of the analysis for Bakersfield, California, and this was done, again, throughout California, but this is looking just at Bakersfield, and so the receiving systems are here in blue, and then the small systems with population less than 3,300 are in pink, and then the purple connecting them are potential areas where the pipeline could be connected with less than 3 miles distance between the receiving system and the small water systems. And so you can see that there are some areas where you've got small water systems outside of the larger receiving systems, and those connections can be made. But you also have some where the small system is already within the service area of the receiving system. And there's a lot of factors why that might already be the case, and they may not be connected, kind of historical development patterns, expectations about how the system will be operated. And so there's a lot of potential for consolidating systems just on the physical connection part of it, but there's also other types of challenges to be addressed, many of which we're kind of talking about as far as important factors to look at in terms of consolidation and regionalization. So that's a lead into talking about new report that's just out this week from the Water Research Foundation, as well as from AWWA and NACWA, that we worked on. Was for water utility partnerships. It's a resource guide and toolbox, and kind of looking at trying to address some of those broader issues, not just the physical connection issues, but how can utilities work together in a variety of types of collaborations to meet needs, lower costs, spread those costs over a bigger base. And so the conceptual framework here is in the slide. You're identifying objectives, you're forming a team to be able to analyze the potential for some type of collaboration and identify the potential options. And then really this framework focuses on evaluation, looking at the economics of it, and the business case, establishing a business case. What are the benefits that come from the potential collaboration? And then addressing concerns that are also potentially from the utilities, the potential partners, and being able to bring those together to kind of resolve and address those concerns and bring that together in a legal agreement that kind of codifies that, so, sets a plan going forward for what's going to be achieved and how to monitor it. So some of the common objectives that were identified, we had a workshop in Denver. A couple of folks from RCAP and other places came and helped us identify common objectives to be shooting for in system partnerships. You can see that there are some economic and cost-related concerns at the top of the list here. Controlling costs, gaining purchasing power, achieving greater economies of scale, again, kind of getting those that larger system ability to be able to spread costs, and matching stranded assets to needs. If you've got excess capacity in certain treatment facilities or storage, being able to make use of that and store it instead of stranding that. Gaining revenue stability was also a high priority. And then generally gaining managerial, financial, and technical capacity was kind of a key goal. As I mentioned, this work looked at a range of partnership types, from mutual aid agreements, sharing arrangements, up to collaboratively developing water resources, contract service arrangements, and all the way up to consolidations. So kind of that range of partnership types. The toolbox has a series of templates for folks to be able to use when analyzing potential partnerships. This one is on controlling costs. So we've got the type of partnership we were just looking at there, the range of partnership types, and the potential match of the objective in the partnership type there. So for mutual aid agreements, potential backup supply at lower costs than otherwise would have been available. Sharing arrangements, cooperative purchasing of chemicals or supplies can lower overall costs, all the way up to consolidation, providing those economies of scale in supply source, treatment, and operations and maintenance. And so, as I mentioned, the part of the focus of this framework is to identify the benefits and really kind of help parties agree on what can be achieved in doing potential collaboration. And so part of that is talking about what would happen without the potential partnership. What are the challenges that are being faced, need to be overcome, and therefore what are the benefits that can come from it. And acknowledging the applicable costs that would come from potential partnership options, as well as intangible benefits and costs where there might not be able to have monetary estimates, but it's important to carry the full range of costs and benefits along when talking about the benefits of partnerships. And then there's also been a focus on broadening the benefit business case evaluation, not just the change in utility costs or water bills, but asking more about the benefits to the region as well. What are the potential benefits for all the impacted parties, including the broader region? Is there a gain in regional water supply reliability that might happen from a partnership? Or is there a gain in water quality that might come from treatment and better use of water resources? What are the potential impacts on the region economically? Are there jobs associated with doing better and implementing options? And then also identifying the risks and other downside potential implications of the partnership and seeing how those issues can be addressed. So again, from that workshop that we had, some of the common concerns were identified. Loss of local control was definitely a number one issue for folks, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But also rate shock or ties to general funds that are existing, and water system debt in the case of consolidation were important concerns to look at. So local control, partnerships were perceived as potential for losing control of source of pride for the community or for folks that had founded the system, but really finding out what specific issues related to control is an important part of this process of identifying what to do. And so the ideas of partnerships can be structured to assure continued local economy over key issues, but also kind of gain the benefits that are intended. An example of this locally, EJ Water Cooperative cooperated with us on this project and told us that they conducted focus groups and interviews with customers, and we're able to understand that it really wasn't so much about ownership and governance issues. It was really more about rates and reliability for them. So going out and talking to the customers, doing the focus groups and surveys really helped them understand that. Compare costs. This is breaking down costs to the water bills for the household level in scenarios, and being able to look at the baseline versus partnership options is really kind of key to looking at economic considerations. An example from Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, under the status quo, water and wastewater bills are projected to double or even triple or quadruple over time. Being able to get to several sub-regional consolidations showed that the average household bill would have a savings of $170 per year, and then total consolidation savings was $260 per year. So they're able to show significant savings there in being able to provide that analysis. Sometimes you have unequal costs and benefits. An example from the Hampton Roads Sanitation District in Virginia showed lower costs overall, but some partners had no cost savings or greater costs. And so in order to help address that, they developed a hybrid model to leave ownership of assets with the current owner, so not consolidate the assets, but instead look at taking on responsibility for improvement of the system with HRSD, from funding an equal charge for all jurisdictions going forward. I'll talk a little bit about affordability. So in the framework and toolbox, we're talking about some key issues for affordability, acknowledging any previous underinvestment and what it might take in order to overcome that underinvestment. But looking at taking advantage of having a larger utility and better economies of scale. So potential, if you've got a larger utility, to have lower fixed charges for essential water service. So being able to change the rate structure a little bit once you look at having a larger utility. And the new entity may also have an enhanced access to grants or low interest loans to help offset costs as well. So it's potential opportunities there. I'm going to talk about an example from California of an affordability analysis. This is a map of nitrate MCL violations from 2013 to 2016 from CIDWA's EPA data. And you can see that this is, the dots there are, the clear one is 1 year violation. The kind of in between orange is 2 years of violation, and 3+ years is the red dots there. So you can see some clusters, especially the red dots, in Texas, Oklahoma area, and California. And so it's looking at, nitrate violation challenges in California as part of this project. And so the question is, would there be possibility to have managerial consolidation of especially the systems in the Central Valley in order to make nitrate treatment more feasible or cost effective? And so the state set up a project under the Proposition 50 funds voted in by voters to look at a $5 million grant to install and operate nitrate treatment system, ion exchange, over a 3-year period, and then doing the analysis that goes with that to understand affordability and how that fits in for utilities. So the idea with the consolidated management would be to try to minimize O&M costs, sharing kind of the design and ongoing look at the treatment systems for each system, being able to share an operator between those systems in order to operate the treatment systems, being able to do bulk purchasing and combining for salt delivery for those systems, and then brine disposal is a big cost. And so being able to help collect that, set up purchasing agreements with disposal providers, and being able to kind of more fully match the disposal amounts with the trucks that are set up to come and go around to each system to pick up the brines. So with those potential gains in O&M reductions, cost estimates are that the potential to reduce O&M treatment costs by as much as 55% and save households $22 to $84 per month on water bills. But the question really is that enough, and what does that mean for systems? And again, that's an estimate. This study is still ongoing. And so the idea then is to look at affordability considerations. And so the study is looking at the community details associated with some example communities. What's the income locally? What's the population? Factors like that. And then what are the treatment costs? What are the capital O&M installation costs? And then looking at some affordability metrics to be able to look at costs for the average water bill, and what does that mean in terms of being able to say whether or not it's going to be affordable going forward. And so in order to get to system level affordability, we're really talking about looking at household level in the analysis to be able to talk about system level affordability. So I'm going to put up a couple of slides of affordability metrics, and the idea really isn't to focus on specific lines in this or anything like this, but there have been some measures of comparing the average household bill to the income in a community that have been the basis for some metrics for affordability going forward. There's been for drinking water, an EPA metric was 2.5% of median household income for drinking water, and then 2% for wastewater, potentially then combining those to be 4.5% of median household income. There have been some other approaches to looking at this, looking at the lowest quintile of income instead of looking at the median household income to try to get at more measures of poverty, as well as kind of going through and really median household income doesn't really reflect measures of poverty and other things that are going on in the community. So there's some various indicators of affordability here that folks have been or in the process of developing going forward. And so this analysis took a few of those here in this chart. So we're looking at affordability metrics for two participating systems here, Tonyville and Woodville in the Central Valley south of Fresno. And I'm not going to go into the details of how each of these perform, but you can see that green, first of all, the current costs are in the leftmost column. Then with consolidated management is in the middle column, and without consolidated management but still addressing nitrate needs is in the third column there. And so you can see under each of these metrics currently, and they're not providing drinking water that meets the standards, they're kind of in green, they're meeting that affordability criteria. But as you move to without consolidated management on the right, you got to see some of these red boxes here indicating that there would not be affordable for those communities in order to be able to meet the nitrate treatment needs going forward. With consolidated management, in the middle columns for each of these, those numbers are lower, meaning that you are getting that benefit that we were looking at before to reductions in water bills from consolidated management. But the question is, it's hard to choose between what indicators you really want to focus on here, and do you want to bank on, this second from the bottom has the most green, but is that something you really want to bank on? So it's still an open question of, is the savings from consolidated management going to be able to help communities afford this going forward? But this is starting to give us an idea of what that means going forward. So they're going to have a grant, to be able to help pay for capital costs, and that's really going to be a big benefit of this project in California, and that's going to help them try to meet affordability. standards, and then the consolidated management is expected to lower O&M costs as well, as we talked about earlier. So even with the capital grant and consolidated management, though, it's still an open question of whether or not the ongoing operations and maintenance especially is going to be affordable for these systems. So after having talked through that affordability example here of addressing common concerns, and being able to link that up to the business case evaluation, then that third part of the framework for the Water Research Foundation project was bringing it together in a legal agreement. So I just want to close that out here. That it's an opportunity to ensure that the benefits you're going to be able to be achieved in a project and meet the concerns, kind of document the concerns that each party had about the partnership and how it's going to be addressed. And then set up performance standards for a partnership to ensure the benefits are achieved and concerns are addressed, and monitor that performance over time going forward. And then critical part of this from the framework is to communicate to build support throughout the process, starting in the beginning, working with your team, getting them organized, but also communicating with community leaders and leaders of the utilities that might be involved in order to understand their values and be able to kind of help make things work going along. So focusing on top 3 values added by the partnership, based on your audience preferences, understanding how the anticipated outcomes of the partnership align with those values, and understanding and addressing key audience concerns. So, in conclusion, we've talked a little about the challenges that utilities and disadvantaged communities face in affordability. Those are going to be important factors going forward, and it's a case of being able to try to get the cost savings to be able to reduce capital costs, but also really focus on the O&M and being able to reduce that burden over time in order to help systems meet viability levels. And then this approach of systematic approach of understanding, undertaking a business case evaluation, and then meeting concerns in trying to address that to form partnerships is really kind of a key to looking at putting partnerships together. So, thank you very much.
Anybody have any questions for Jim?
Are these slides going to be available to us?
Yes. Yes. Oh, sorry. Deb, you mentioned.
I was just going to ask if you could talk a little bit about, I think the toolkit is a really good idea, and I just wondered if maybe you could give some examples of, what communities might be able to find in the toolkit.
Yeah, I mentioned that there's some templates and discussion examples of the steps going through the process of identifying your objectives, being able to match those to the partnership type, being able to then express for the options that you identify what the benefits could be, to really having that to shoot for and putting the partnership together. And so there's examples of and discussion of those types of benefits, that might come from the partnerships, as well as common concerns. And so the toolbox kind of leads you through with templates for looking at that, and provides more discussion on business case evaluation and an appendix. And throughout, then it also identifies existing literature that have been used in looking at these various topics. And so there's links and kind of a quick discussion of the literature that our toolbox was based on in order to be able to have folks to know where to go for more information and looking deeper in each of these issues.
Did you have, I didn't notice, but did you have a website where that's available, where people can find that?
It's newly posted this week, and I forgot to go ahead and get that website address up, but maybe we can figure out a way to share that with folks. maybe in a follow-up.
I was just going to ask, you're working in California. I understand they just passed a new law about allowing O&M costs to be, there's grant funding for that. And I don't know any of the details, and I didn't know if maybe you did.
I don't really know the details either. They've been making some progress in terms of new legislation that's been coming out, human right to water, and other things. And so that's been a challenge, is not being able to get grant funding to cover O&M costs. So that's something we should look for, because it's really is a burden, because you can get grant funding or other things to help cover capital costs, but covering O&M has definitely been a challenge.
Linda Morales with RCAC. I happen to be very familiar with the area you're discussing. One of the questions I have is, are you also exploring utilities that are not contiguous to a large municipality that they can connect to? There are plenty of other communities. I'll mention, for example, we're working in northern Shasta County, where we have as many as 37 systems, and there's no big city that they can connect to. Are you doing any studies in those kind of situations? Because there are plenty of them.
Yeah, so the analysis that I showed was kind of a preliminary analysis. They just wanted to say, they were considering that physical connections greater than 3 miles were difficult and expensive, and so that was kind of just used as a cutoff, and wanted to see what the possibilities were within that 3 mile radius. So that was really the focus of the study. They're looking to go further with that study and bring in more systems. There were some state related systems that weren't able to be included, and so we are looking at broadening that analysis. But I think the idea still is to look at potential for interconnections within a certain distance.
I have just a quick question. In your studies, when you talk about consolidation, are you talking about the producing of like water, or taking over the entire system? The reason why I'm asking is because in Illinois, a lot of these very small communities, the only income is their utilities. They have no tax base, or it's appreciated out. So when you're talking about this, are you talking more of like doing maybe a large water, just like commission to produce it, or taking over just the entire system for these small towns?
In the toolbox, we're looking at a full range of options, from sharing an operator, or being able to do cooperative purchasing of chemicals and things like that, on up to the potential for consolidation. But there's a lot of stops along the way for focusing on treatment, like in the consolidated management when we're talking about nitrate, to developing water resources collaboratively at a regional level, and so that study, especially that guide and toolbox, looks at the full range of potential partnership types. Some of the studies we're looking at with the physical consolidation, we're setting up interconnections and things like that. So it's a full range.
So in your studies, are you finding that, let's say you have a bigger community that's willing to take on the smaller system, are they wanting, because you talked about affordability and you talked about the economies of scales, are these systems that you've seen so far wanting to charge the same rates to the new customers they're hooking on as their existing customers, or are you seeing where they want to charge different rates amongst the customers?
So one thing that utilities have looked at in making those connections is having a connection fee, so at least some compensation up front for kind of bringing on a new system, and the challenges, the costs that go with that. So I would say that in general, systems are looking at trying to fold the new customers into the rate base so that you're charging the same. But there may end up having to be unique solutions that folks might need to negotiate if there's been, chronic underinvestment in the utility or the system that's being taken on. Perhaps there's a need to kind of work up to being able to get everybody on the same rates over time. So there's been, I think, some openness to that. But in general, I think most systems that we've seen are looking at trying to get everybody on the same rate base.
In your study, have you had issues where, I'm familiar with a small community, say, wanting to hook onto the neighboring community, but the neighboring community has a certain specification, say pipe, or what they're requiring for their system, and the system they were looking at bringing on didn't have that specification of pipe. So that kind of became a roadblock. Is that?
It's not something that I've necessarily seen, examples of. But I'm sure that exists, and I think you'd need to look specifically at the types of pipes and whether or not you can, make that interconnection without having problems and corrosion or other types of operational challenges. But it's pretty specific, I think, to the types of pipe. But it's just one of a multitude of challenges that folks need to face when looking at the potential for connection.
I guess along that same line, I've seen where the little community didn't necessarily want to hook on because they, in fear of annexation, they wanted to keep their autonomy.
Yeah, local control is a powerful factor, people get used to what they've been always doing, and there's a really kind of a built-in desire there to keep things as they are. But in a lot of cases, there's benefits to be gained, and really kind of being able to talk about what are the benefits, and it may be that you get lower rates in the end that you can entice those folks with to kind of look beyond the local control concerns. So,
I'm trying to wrap my head around the lower rates. So I believe there was a slide that showed if you do status quo, so no consolidation, over time it's more expensive. I believe there was a slide that showed that. So when you talk about the reduced rates being $55 for OEM, is that compared to status quo over time increasing, or is that truly lower because you're spreading your costs out over more people, so they actually their bill currently goes down?
yeah, that's a good question, keeping track of what you're comparing to over time and the baseline. That reduction of up to $55 was in the O&M costs associated with being able to meet the nitrate treatment needs, however they need to be met. So it's that reduction of costs going forward in trying to meet requirements. And so, that reduces potential bills in the future compared to what they would be without the consolidated management. But yet there's still that question of, is that reduction in future bills enough in order to be able to make it affordable for the community? Anything else? Great.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.